The engines thundered before dawn, echoing across the French coast. The air was thick with fuel, salt, and urgency. Few men on that cold August morning realized they were about to drive into history, not with tanks or bombers, but with trucks. August 25th, 1944. Cherbourg Harbor, Normandy. Sergeant William Henderson wiped the grease from his hands and stared in disbelief at the endless line of vehicles stretching toward the horizon. Only months earlier, these trucks had been dismissed as failures, underpowered, clumsy, and unfit for modern war. Yet now, 6,000 of them stood ready to supply General Patton's Third Army as it roared across 400 miles of devastated French countryside. Stamped on every hood were 3 simple letters: GMC, General Motors Corporation. But to the mostly African-American drivers climbing into those trucks, exhausted before their engines even started, those letters meant something else: survival, endurance, and the lifeline between victory and defeat. None of them knew it yet. But this humble 212-ton truck, the GMC CCKW, nicknamed the Jimmy or the Deuce and a half, would soon prove more valuable than any tank or airplane. It would become the backbone of the most critical supply operation in modern military history. The story began years earlier, far from the battlefields in 1939, inside the quiet design rooms of General Motors. The U.S. Army Ordnance Corps had requested a new 6-wheel drive truck capable of hauling heavy loads over any terrain. Engineers at GMC's Pontiac, Michigan plant started with a commercial design and strengthened it, adding a second rear axle, all-wheel drive, and reinforced steel rails. The first prototype, the ACKW X353, ran on a modest 77-horsepower inline-6 engine. France ordered 1,000 of them, but before they could be delivered, the German blitzkrieg swept across Europe. France fell, and the trucks meant for its army were captured by the Germans and used on the Eastern Front, where even enemy soldiers admitted their reliability. The British tested their share of the early trucks and found them lacking, too slow, too heavy, too wide for Europe's narrow roads. Declared unsuitable for war, most were sent east under the Lend-Lease program to the Soviet Union. To British analysts, America's idea of mass-producing good-enough trucks seemed crude. But American engineers understood something vital. In a global war, quantity mattered as much as quality. The goal wasn't to build the perfect truck. It was to build enough trucks to win. By 1941, GMC introduced the redesigned model, the CCKW. The letters stood for C, 1941 design year. C, conventional cab, K, all-wheel drive, and W, dual rear axles. With a new 270 cubic inch engine producing 104 horsepower and improved torque, the CCKW had 35% more power than its predecessor. It could climb muddy hills, cross bomb-cratered roads, and carry 5 tons of cargo where other vehicles failed. 2 main versions rolled off the line: the shorter CCKW 352 used for artillery, and the longer 353 for general cargo. Its design emphasized simplicity: riveted ladder frame construction, leaf spring suspension, and hydraulic brakes, all repairable with basic tools. Early trucks had enclosed steel cabs, but by 1943, open canvas tops replaced them to save weight and steel. The result was a vehicle that was rugged, adaptable, and easy to mass produce. GMC's factories in Michigan and Missouri worked around the clock, building 1 truck every 7 minutes. By the war's end, more than 500,000 had been produced, more than the entire German wartime truck output combined. The CCKW became a chameleon of the battlefield: cargo carrier, fuel tanker, troop transport, ambulance, mobile workshop, radio truck, and even an anti-aircraft platform. By June 1944, thousands had crossed the Atlantic for the invasion of Normandy. D-Day was a success, but by August, the Allied advance was in danger of stalling, not because of the enemy, but because of fuel. Patton's armored divisions were devouring gasoline faster than supply lines could deliver it. Each Sherman tank burned 150 gallons per 100 miles, and the ports at Cherbourg and Arromanches were overwhelmed. Railroads were bombed, bridges destroyed. The Allied armies were winning battles, but losing to logistics. Then came a bold idea. On August 21, 1944, U.S. logistics officers conceived the Red Ball Express, a non-stop trucking operation to move supplies directly from the Normandy ports to the front lines. Borrowed from railroad terminology, Red Ball meant express cargo with absolute priority. Special roads were marked with red circles. Every intersection was guarded by military police. Civilian traffic was banned. The plan was daring, desperate, and essential. There was one more challenge: drivers. The U.S. Army was still segregated, and African-American soldiers were largely confined to service roles, long dismissed by white officers as unfit for combat. Yet it was these men, the mechanics, clerks, and laborers of the Quartermaster Corps, who stepped forward to drive the Red Ball Express. Of the 23,000 men involved, nearly 75% were African-American. Many were barely out of their teens. Some came from small southern towns, others from northern factories or colleges. With only days of training, they set out on cratered French roads in 5-ton trucks loaded with fuel, ammunition, and food. On August 25, 1944, the same day Paris was liberated, the first convoys rolled out from Cherbourg. 2 one-way routes, nearly 400 miles long, snaked across France. One for loaded trucks heading east, one for empties returning west. Convoys ran day and night, escorted by jeeps front and rear, trucks spaced 60 yards apart. In theory, they were limited to 25 miles per hour, but in practice, many disabled their speed governors and thundered ahead at 50, desperate to stay awake. Blackout conditions made driving deadly. Roads were unlit. Only faint cat's eye reflectors guided them. Drivers followed the dim outline of the truck ahead, praying it didn't swerve into a crater or off a bridge. They lived on coffee, cigarettes, and adrenaline, sometimes taking benzodrine tablets to stay awake through 50-hour shifts. Fatigue was constant. Accidents were inevitable. Trucks overturned, brakes failed, and collisions were common. But the convoys kept moving. Maintenance was chaos and brilliance combined. Mechanics worked by lantern light, scavenging parts, wiring, and bolts to keep engines alive. One truck might be cannibalized to save 3 more. Tires blew constantly, brakes wore out in days, yet the jimmies endured. Soldiers joked that the trucks ran on courage as much as gasoline. By the end of August, broken vehicles lined the roadsides, but the convoys were delivering over 12,000 tons of supplies a day. In just 82 days, the Red Ball Express moved more than 412,000 tons across France, a feat unmatched in military history. The African-American drivers endured racism even as they carried the war on their backs. They were barred from white mess halls, harassed by white MPs, and warned not to fraternize with white troops. Yet when their convoys reached the front, even the most prejudiced soldiers knew who kept them alive. Drivers remembered ambushes, exhaustion, and the roar of enemy aircraft overhead. They also remembered pride, the knowledge that without them, Patton's tanks would stop dead. By September, the Red Ball route stretched deep into central France. But as the line grew, the strain did too. Fuel demands soared. Trucks wore out faster than they could be repaired. Drivers fell asleep at the wheel. Some cargo vanished into black markets in liberated cities. Still, the mission never stopped. Patton's advance across France was fueled not by glory or glamour, but by the endless rumble of GMC engines and the hands that steered them. General Eisenhower himself praised the Red Ball Express, writing that their excellent job had made victory possible. The contrast with German logistics was stark. The vaunted Wehrmacht still relied on over 2 million horses to haul supplies. The Allies' mechanized force, symbolized by the GMC truck, proved decisive. By mid-November 1944, the Red Ball Express had completed its mission. Antwerp's port was open, pipelines were laid, and railways were repaired. After 82 grueling days, the convoys finally stood down. But when Hitler launched his final offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, the same trucks and drivers were called back under new names, the Little Red Ball and the White Ball Express. In freezing snow and under enemy fire they rolled again. Engines froze, hands bled, and still they drove. Without them, the relief of Bastogne might never have come. When the war ended, the GMC CCKW stood as a symbol of American endurance and ingenuity. More than 500,000 were built, trucks that rebuilt Europe, carried refugees and served again in Korea. Simple, rugged, and endlessly repairable, the Jimmy proved that victory in modern war depended not on brilliance or speed, but on the relentless ability to keep men and machines moving. General Patton once said, "The 2.5-ton truck is our most valuable weapon." He was right. The Red Ball Express showed that armies march not just on courage, but on wheels. And those wheels bore the mark of the humble GMC and the hands of men who drove them through hell and into history.